Okay, great. So your book is, I mean, it's kind of irresistible and weird.
Well, thank you for saying so.
I just you just can't help but flip through these and look at these things.
Yes, I think this is a strange thing to say. Perhaps I consider it a bathroom book. It's not to be read cover to cover, but in a quiet moment when you when you're alone with your thoughts, just to flip through random pages and in no particular order, just see where the book opens to.
Yeah, what on earth got you into this?
Well, my previous novel, The Lemon Jello Syndrome, the protagonist in it uses sentence diagrams as a way of self therapy. And my agent called me one time and said, I think you should produce a book of sentence diagrams. And I said, well, if you think so, if you think that's a good idea. So I did it. As I was doing them, um, you know, they are weirdly appealing. I found them unexpectedly charming myself. And so
Yeah.
lo and behold, here's the book.
I'm 63. By the time I was in high school, sentence diagramming was already dying out pretty fast. So I mean, I was aware of it. I think a teacher might have shown us a few of them, but we didn't really get into it. When was sentence diagramming's heyday?
Probably I would say the late 1800s, early 1900s, probably till the end of World War II. I think it began to die out with the dawn of the baby boom. I'm also 67. Today is my birthday. Happy birthday to me.
Oh,
Um,
thank you. Happy
and
birthday.
but they sort of reemerge like a sea serpent. It submerges and they're sort of making a strange comeback. I'm a retired English teacher, and I used sentence diagrams, sometimes with my class. I realized very quickly, as far as a method of teaching grammar, honestly, there are such easier ways to do it. The best way is just to read everything and you listen to people who speak well. But what sentence diagrams do is they compel you to think about each word carefully. What is the role it plays in this sentence? And then when the diagram is constructed, it obviously but truly gives you a visual representation of the meaning of the sentence. And it's kind of delightful to see it spatially organized that way. You get very revelatory in some ways.
It seems to me there was always a number of people, I think a small number of people, who were just intensely into sentence diagramming,
Yes.
and the rest of us were kind of baffled by it. Is that
Yes.
your impression too?
I think that's it. There's always a little coterie of people who are just intensely involved in something. And I say, of course, is that I'm not a complete sentence diagramming fanatic, but God bless them, for keeping this strange art alive for the rest of us to visit when we will.
Do you think we lost something when we stopped, something valuable when we stopped diagramming sentences?
What's the song say? Something's lost and something's gained every day. I mean, it's. I think the sentence diagrams always have the reek of being slapped on the wrist with a ruler by a teacher. There's always this feeling that Miss Othmar is going to come down on you if you don't diagram properly. Um, I think it's kind of nice that they're reincarnated at the present moment as a diversion rather than a discipline. And so, yeah, I don't know if something's lost or gained. Something's definitely changed.
I wonder what their role is in this new age of AI when many students aren't doing any writing at all.
I don't know. Maybe there is this tiny life preserver could be offered. The terror is that AI will produce text on one end and read and evaluate it on the other end, so that entire tomes of literature and analysis will be created and consumed without passing under a human eye one time. As of yet, I assume, I'm sure it can. I'm sure Chat GPT can diagram sentences, except why would you want it to? It's so yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Who knows what the fate of the language will be? Who can say? Who can and how we choose to portray it and comprehend it.
As we get as students particularly get so casual with language and stop paying attention to it because of AI, I just love the idea of this method that forces them back into the mechanics of the sentence in a very particular mechanical way. That
Right.
seems really salutary to me.
I think it is. You know, of course, I'm a proponent of sentence diagramming for that very reason, and I like the word particular there because you're looking at it as particles. And so, yeah, it's you know, the beauty of a single sentence. Uh, maybe is something that AI can generate. It can never be something AI will appreciate.
It The problem, I guess, for most students is they just don't know grammar well enough, right? They cannot
Right.
identify the parts of speech well enough anymore. So that's the first barrier. And then the second barrier, of course, is the method itself, which has its own peculiarities.
Right. And I think that, you know, that some readers too, not just as writers, you know, you come across a long sentence, you know, in our friend William Shakespeare, for example, and you know, you read it and you emerge with the foggiest notion of what it's talking about. You know, you pick up one or two key words and you think you understand it. Uh, when you diagram a complex sentence, you do get a clear grasp of the meaning, and you also have a grasp of just the beauty of the structure and the choices that a really skilled writer makes as he composes a sentence.
Yeah, I'm persuaded by that. I don't know if it's worth the sweat and the terror of putting
Yes,
students through it.
yes. I'll admit I'm not sure either. Is anything worth anything? You know, nothing is ever worth the price you pay to attain it. But you know, like it's not. You know, it is an art, both interpreting and creating and appreciating it. And art is always, let's just admit it, a waste of energy. You know, it's always devoted to something that in itself serves no practical purpose. You know, who is a dime the richer for loving a rainbow? You know, it's that sort of thing. You do it weirdly enough for the pleasure of it, and that's why people end up being sort of fanatics about it. They go in their little private garrets and obsessively diagram, you know, the Declaration of Independence or, you know, a tax code page or something like that, just to see that it can be done.
Yeah. Would two talented sentence diagrammers always produce the same graphical diagram?
In the most interesting cases, no. I think there always is choices to be made. So, you know, you come across a sentence like, I smell the oysters coming upstairs for dinner. If you diagram it one way, there's a dangling participle. If you diagram it another way, it's the last sentence of a Stephen King novel. So, you know, the choices you make in diagramming a sentence are real. And I'll admit there's several in the book that to this point I'm not satisfied with. I simply couldn't do it. There's the line from Shakespeare, now is the winter of our discontent, you know, et cetera, glorious summer and all the clouds that lowered on our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. I tell you, I it's terrible. I lost sleep worrying about what to do with that buried. I think I need a three-dimensional plane in order to put it in the right place. You know, I'm satisfied enough. But if someone called me on it and said, "Oh no, no, you did this wrong," I'd say, "Well, you know, that's the choice I made."
And the ambiguity in that example, and I guess another example, is that one could disagree about what's being modified. Is that the case?
Yes, and where So, and what is that verb? What is that verb doing? It's you know, this will end up on the cutting room floor. I know. The so all the cloud. This has to start. That's the winter of our discontent. Made glorious summer. Okay, by the son of York. The son of York has made it glorious summer. The son of York is also the one who buried all the clouds that lowered on our house in the deep bosom of the ocean. Uh, you know, how do you represent that on the page? I've looked through books of sentence diagrams, you know, by people who have made it their dubious profession to diagram sentences for the rest of us, and you know, they're just shameless about having dotted lines crisscross each other and do all sorts of things. For me, part of my objective of the book was to somehow maintain the beauty of the sentence in the diagram. So I didn't want something that just looked like a dog's lunch. But, indeed, in some cases, maybe that's the only way to represent it accurately.
Interesting. I noticed that you don't really teach sentence diagramming in this book. I mean, there are not instructions sufficient to tell someone how to diagram a sentence in this book.
No, that's exactly right. This is not a book to teach you how to diagram sentences or teach you grammar or teach you how to write or anything. It's just an appreciation. And I think that the most marvelous thing for me is again this discovery that really and truly diagramming it graphically, the sentences represent their own meaning. So Rumsfeld's quotation, we know there are known unknowns, and these are things we know that we don't know, but there are also unknown unknowns, things we don't know that we don't know. When you diagram that sentence, it's precisely the weird tinker toy of illogic that you imagine when you listen to it. And I've got several examples of, just for lack of better word salad. There's this insane rant that an AI robot, Bina 358, goes on that it takes 2 pages to diagram. And it begins by saying, I would send out little messages of love and help and the importance of being together. And then it ends with her threatening to take over the world by the time you get to the last clause.
The book came out fairly recently, but have you gotten feedback from people?
I have, first of all, obviously from my editors. Most people, at first, their reaction is, I remember diagramming sentences, and then there's a little ellipsis, and the next words are either I loved it or I hated it.
Yep.
And then, but even the people who hated it are sort of there's sort of magnetic charm to it. And again, there is I don't want this to have any sort of fear factor in it. This should be an absolutely approachable book to enjoy any way you see fit.
And tell me about your own career. You mentioned you were an English teacher. You may have been other things too.
Yeah, so I was an English teacher. I suppose I must have come across sentence diagramming in the third grade or something. And I was a high school English teacher, and I was very interested in at sentence level, getting my students to write beautifully on the sentence level. And so, there's so much more to grammar than speaking or writing correctly. In fact, that's almost the least important part of it. And it was nice to be able to just break down a sentence with them and look at its component parts. What diagramming sort of disrupts, and at the back of the book, there's an index to the sentences. Diagrams present the sentences spatially, and then the sentence itself presents the information temporally. And so a beautifully constructed sentence, often has the stinger in the tail, or there'll be an emphatic point in an unexpected place. And you do lose that with diagrams. But you get, again, you get an overall sense of what the sentence is doing. Hamlet's, famous to be or not to be, whether 'tis nobler in the mind, etc. When you see it on the page diagrammed, it's a series of forking paths. And it actually is like a visual representation of a dilemma. This or that over and over again. Take arms against a sea of troubles, or, suffer the slings and arrows. And again, he just comes to these forks, which is just beautiful to see on the page. Again, if you like that sort of thing. Surprisingly, the famous, the iconic, these are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise, etc. The Gene Roddenberry could not have known this. When you diagram the sentence, it bears a striking resemblance to the starship itself, which is interesting. Yeah, how that's possible, I don't know, but it does.
That's nice.
And of course, some of the sentences, you know, are interesting just because of the provenance of the sentence. Um, there's a beautiful quotation from Frida Kahlo, which is, and I diagram it both in Spanish and English. It's feet. What do I need them for if I have wings to fly? Which is a beautiful thought in itself. But then the comment tells you this is what she wrote in her diary before her leg was amputated.
Jeez.
Isn't that powerful? And it just those sorts of so you've got the sentence diagram, which you've got to sort of parse through and reconstruct into English, and then the comment reveals something about it too. Or another the first chapter, of course, is opening lines, which is opening lines of books mostly, and the last chapter is closing lines, which is people's last words or putative last words. And one of my favorite and most touching is, "Excuse me, monsieur, I did not mean to do that." And that's what Marie Antoinette said when she stepped on her executioner's foot on the way to the guillotine. And those things are just haunting. Or, of course,
Yeah.
and he probably didn't say it, but I pray to the Lord that he did. Supposedly, Groucho Marx's last words were, "Dying? That's the last thing I'll do." I hope I have the presence of mind to say something like that on my deathbed.
Well, it was a pleasure to talk to you. I really appreciate this.
Well, I enjoyed it.
Uh,
Thank you so much.